Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today, we're going to talk about Altered Carbon. This is a Netflix original that starts off really promising and then gets a little silly towards the end. I recommend it for a watch, but I was personally let down. I know some other people were let down by it a little bit. Claudia's opinion on it was generally positive, but it has some weird qualities, and it's got in it what I am starting to notice might be a bit of a pattern in Netflix, where I think that they have kind of a quota where they're looking for like certain amounts of diversity, and every show that they pay for needs to have some kind of like weird sexual quirk to it. Like, there's just got to be something in there that's like, this character has some kind of different sexuality, and it needs to be portrayed in a positive light or something like that. I don't know. I've just noticed there's like a lot of different Netflix originals I've been watching where this comes up, and it could just be the culture and the times, but I don't know. It's not always done in a way that kind of like seamlessly integrates. Sometimes it feels like it's really distracting. Like, you get into BoJack and like the whole Todd is asexual thing, and it's kind of like Todd's sexuality is so trivial and unimportant. It just feels like it's wasting time to even focus on stuff like that. It's weird. Altered Carbon, apparently it's a book, and I have been told that the book is actually pretty good, and that the Netflix original doesn't exactly follow the book in its entirety. In fact, it kind of does some things. It deviates from the book, partly to create some weird, I don't know, alternate perspectives of things, and then also kind of to highlight some of the weird diversity things. I don't know. It's weird. That's why I bring it up. The diversity stuff doesn't really, the diversity and the weird sexual stuff doesn't really like ruin the show. But I'll get into it, and I'll get into why it's just sort of weird. Because at first it's like you go along with it and it makes sense. But then like they just kind of keep going and they never drop it. And it gets to be to where like, it's like they're building this house out of cards, and it's just sort of like, all right, now, hang on, how is this working? So anyway, though, so Altered Carbon, it starts off, and because it's based on a book, the premise is actually pretty cool. The idea is that the technology to transfer a human consciousness is finally perfected. What you have now are these little computer things called stacks, which they just insert into your spine. And you can transfer yourself, you can download your brain into any kind of body that you want, and they call the bodies a sleeve. It's still illegal to kill a person's sleeve, because that's physical violence against them, and sleeves are expensive. But essentially, if you have enough money to afford a bunch of bodies, then you can potentially live forever. And sleeves are produced, I'm pretty sure, from like when people are arrested or whatever. They just take their body away, and then if somebody is sick, like if a child gets killed in an accident, then the courts can say like, well, your child is allowed to have a new body. So they just give him a body. But because it's a court system, and this is sort of an it's that sort of sci-fi dystopian thing, what'll actually happen is that they'll take your 6-year-old child and they'll put it in some, old 80-year-old woman that nobody wanted because, the state sold off all the good bodies to rich proprietors or whatever, and that's just how it works. So, if your child gets hit by a car, they get another 10 years of life or whatever, and then they die from this old woman with syphilis that they had on file. So, yeah, it's kind of a dystopia based on the idea that revolves around the idea of like living forever. And our main hero is this guy they call Tack. I can't remember what his real name is, but we're just gonna call him Tack and the Power. It's Tack and the Power of Juju. And anyway, so Tack is a powerful shaman called an emissary, and emissaries were apparently this crack team of elite killers from that were based on a place called Harlan's World. And you'll learn a little bit more about that later, and that's when you learn about them, that's when the show starts to get really disappointing. But starting off, they're just kind of like hinting at it. They're just like, oh, emissaries, emissaries, this is very important. So they wake up Tack, and a lady comes to pick him up, and then he's like, all right, so what's going on? And she's like, well, I'm taking you to go see, I can't remember what his name is. Ben and Jerry's, Ben Bennigan. I'm taking you to go see Ben Bennigan, who's or Bancroft, that's what it was. Ben Bennigan. I'm taking you to go see Ben Bennigan, who is a very rich and powerful man who has been alive for hundreds of years. In fact, he's so old that he remembers the war between the emissaries and the Galactic Republic, whatever we are. And so he's really interested in meeting you because you guys were such a huge threat, and it was such a big deal that you existed, and it's just really neat. And so she crash lands the car into their sky base. They live up in the sky because they're rich and they can afford floating houses. And so she crashes her flying car into that, and then she gets out and she's like, it turns out I wasn't actually trained to fly one of these cars. I'm a police officer and I'm investigating. It's not clear what I'm investigating, but the point is I'm investigating you. And so Ben Bennigan is the family rather, his wife comes out and she's like, what you're doing is actually kind of illegal. Like, you're really not supposed to just abduct people. Please leave, or I'll have you arrested, I guess. I don't know. Like, this cop doesn't really follow any kind of procedure as far as it goes. She's just throughout the entire series like, can you please break the law for me? And everyone's like, yeah, that'd be great. I'll break the law for you. So she kind of breaks the law, and then they're just like, all right, go away. And so she goes away. And so they invite Tack in, and Tack meets with Ben Bennigan, and Ben Bennigan is like, see this splotch on the wall? Those are my brains. See, someone took a plasma gun out of my safe and then shot me in the head with it, and I want to find out who. I want you to find out who. The police ruled it as a suicide, and the trick is, if you get shot in the stack, you're dead forever. So technically speaking, being killed should be about as easy as ever. I mean, like, it's a little bit more difficult to kill somebody if you don't get their stack. If their stack can be salvaged, then they could be revived. But for the most part, being killed is still fairly simple. So the very, very rich, what they have is they have a system. They're allowed to download backups or upload backups to like a remote link somewhere. And whenever they die, their backup will be imported into the new body. So this Ben Bennigan guy, he has a backup that takes place every 48 hours. And he got killed just before his backup started, so he couldn't remember anything in the past 48 hours. There's a bunch of loose ends to tie up, like he had this business deal that he closed, and he doesn't remember closing it. Like, he's like, yeah, I don't know how I pulled this together so quickly within 48 hours. That's actually kind of weird. And this and that, and they drop these little hints. And he's got like this old material, and he's like, here's this old diary from Phoebe, the top emissary. I can't remember her name now. Phoebe, the top emissary. Phoebe was a very important emissary, and I assume that since you're the last emissary alive, that you'd be interested in having this diary. And so Tack's like, he's like, I don't work for a price. He goes, put me back into prison. I don't really care about this. I'd rather just be locked away for good. And so Ben Bennigan says, well, think about it and get back to me. So Tack goes down to Earth, and he takes all the money that Ben Bennigan gave him up front, and he uses it to buy all the drugs. And he buys this like pink backpack. Like the drugs are in this like pink unicorn backpack or something like that. It's like a pink cartoon. It's like a little girl's backpack, and it's kind of funny because he buys this backpack, and from then on just uses it throughout the entire show. Like, he never gets another bag. This bright pink backpack, he like stores guns in it, drugs, every imaginable thing. The backpack for the entire rest of the show just stays with him, which I sort of enjoy. And anyway, though, he does all the drugs, and so the cop then finds him in the street, and she's like, hey, what you doing, buddy? And he's like, all the drugs. And she's like, so are you gonna work for Ben Bennigan? And he's like, no. And then she's like, well, I'll be watching you in case you do anything you shouldn't. And he's like, I'm already doing lots of things I shouldn't. And she's like, okay, well, if you do more things, you're gonna be arrested. So what he does then is he goes to this AI hotel. And it's funny because the cop tells him, like, yeah, nobody goes to these AI hotels anymore. She says they're like clingy girlfriends, they're trained to like you, but they like you a little too much, and it's really weird and it's really uncomfortable. And in the book, maybe this was true, but in the movie, it feels like the character went through maybe a couple of different drafts. Like, maybe he was originally written to be too clingy, but then the authors decided he was kind of annoying like that, so they made him more useful. And then they kind of just gradually made him more useful. And so this AI hotel, he's actually a character, and it's really weird. because Claudia found him just a little bit annoying. But I think that may have been a holdover from like a previous draft of the script, because you're supposed to really like him by the end of the show. It's obvious you're supposed to like him. So I think they kind of had one track they were going, and so there's this character dialogue that establishes you're not gonna like the AI. But then all the writing then later on tries to establish the AI as this character that you're really gonna like. So it just feels like they started in one direction, but then kind of changed tracks and tried to go in a different direction. So it's a little bit weird with this AI. But the AI is very strange. He goes to the AI, and it's like everything is themed in like a sort of a Victorian era deal. The guy looks like Edgar Allan Poe. Everything is kind of themed to this sort of like, oh, macabre, whatever. And so he comes in, and Tack's like, I'd like to check in. And Edgar Allan Poe is like, I believe his name is actually Poe. Poe is like, well, we could have you have virtual sex with all the ladies. And Tack's like, nah, I just want a room. And then Poe's like, okay, just a room. So then some hitmen show up, and they're like, we're here to murder Tack. And apparently I think they're just there to kidnap him or whatever, but they show up and they're like, we're here for Tack. And Tack's like, shoot. So they punch him in the face for a while, and it's a big action scene, and Tack's lying on the floor, and then he gets up and he signs into the room. And then because he's a guest, the hotel is allowed to defend him. So the hotel deploys like machine guns and just murders everyone in the room except for Tack. And so unfortunately what happens is all the criminals miraculously have their stacks destroyed so that they can't be interrogated or whatever, which just goes to show how the whole stack thing is like a flawed premise in that, it really seems fairly easy to destroy a stack, so I don't see how... like they have this thing where they go into where they're like, oh yeah, if you're religious, you can have coding put in your stack that prevents it from being activated after you're dead, because once you're dead. So they do this where they have this like whole plot line where they're like, yeah, if religious people die, you can't then interrogate them about who murdered them, and so there becomes like this sort of thread where they're like, oh, but this person wasn't religious. Like, why do they have religious coding if they weren't religious? Someone faked their religious coding so that they couldn't testify after their death. And I didn't understand that. Because if you didn't want someone to testify after their death, why didn't you just blow up their stack? Like, why go through all the trouble to infect them with, like, I don't know, a religious code? Like, why fake their religious coding to prevent them from being spun up when you could just take a gun and blow up their stack and that was it, they'd be dead forever? It seemed like unnecessarily convoluted, but anyway, we'll get back to that. So all the stacks are dead, no one can be interrogated. If they were religious, it would have been the same effect, but more subtle, I suppose. So the police show up and they're like, well, Tack, keeping our eyes on you. If you're doing anything bad, then, it's an arrest. And Tack's like, I did all the drugs and was involved in a mass murder. I've already done everything bad. And the cops are like, yeah, well, if it gets a little worse, we're coming, Tack. And so Tack decides that he's going to go back to Ben Bennigan after all. And he's like, yeah, so some dudes tried to kill me. So I'm going to go ahead and take this job because now it feels like it's a big deal. So he starts looking into who killed Ben Bennigan. What was the deal with Ben Bennigan? And throughout the course of this thing, because it's kind of a murder, it's like a mystery deal. It's like a suspense thriller. He just sort of unlocks all these different little things. He pulls these little threads, and of course, this is all full of spoilers. So, I can't really recall all the little setups that they did, but I do know that he starts looking into people who might have killed Ben Bennigan. And one of the people that he sees is there's like this ex-military dude, and he's like threatening Ben Bennigan in video, and he's got like a gun, and the gun has a serial number on it. So of all the people that could murder Ben Bennigan, Tack decides that this one guy is one of the few who would be likely to pull it off because he had like military training. So he goes to go see him, and he's like this impoverished dude who's like living by himself, and his wife used to be a hacker, but she got arrested, so he's just by himself now. And then his daughter was like a sex worker, but she was killed, and I think tortured. I think her brain was tortured, And I can't remember why they tortured her brain, or if they ever really properly... I mean, they did explain it, but I remember this is about where things stopped making sense and motivations were kind of stupid. So anyway, they tortured this girl for no particular reason. They murdered her and then they tortured her, but they didn't destroy her stack. They just tortured her stack, which sounded really expensive to do. Torturing someone's stack until they could no longer function as a human seemed like a really involved process. Like, you had to hire a specific company to do it. You know, you got to go out of your way. Whereas, like, killing a stack is just like you put a bullet in the stack and the stack's dead. So, yes, anyway, though, yeah, so this guy, he was really mad because Ben Bennigan... he apparently had sort of a bizarre sexual appetite. He liked to kill people. Like, he would like to have sex with them and then murder them. This was a habit that he had. But because people lived in sleeves, this was legally accepted. You know, what he would do is he would kill the ladies, but it would all be, like, under contract, so he would kill them, and then he would buy them a new sleeve. And apparently there were, like, blood sports that worked on the same principle. You would sign a contract, and you would fight to the death, and then after you died, whoever commissioned the fight would agree to replace your body or whatever. So yeah, so this was kind of a thing. Like apparently now it's legal to kill hookers just so long as you replace their body afterward, and this was something that Ben Bennigan did on a regular basis. Apparently he killed this girl whose name, everyone's name escapes me now. I knew all their names before I started the video, and then I turned on the camera and I lost them all. We're just gonna call her Spazzy. Anyway, though, so Spazzy the girl, Spazzy the victim, she's insane, and her dad is pissed, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna kill Ben Bennigan. So Tack breaks in, beats up this dad, who we're gonna call Jerry, because we have Ben, so now we have Ben and Jerry. Anyway, though, so he beats up Jerry, and Jerry's like, listen, I didn't actually kill Ben Bennigan. And Tack's like, you know what, I believe you, because I'm a emissary and I have all this, like, intuition and stuff like that. And so when people say things, I'm usually right about what they're saying the first time around. So he investigates and he finds that Spazzy is crazy. And so he comes back to Jerry and he's like, Jerry, why is your daughter, like, spun up in that machine? Like, she's insane. You're making her just live through an endless torture scene. And he's like, well, I wanted to see her again, and, you know, if I have to, like, if she has to be tortured for me to see her, then I guess she may as well be tortured. And so Tack's like, that's not very good. Let's team up. And I can't remember exactly, it wasn't really that stupid, but eventually he does team up with Jerry, and I can't remember why he decides to team up with Jerry. Oh, that's right, because... Now I remember why. So Tack goes home after interrogating this guy and, you know, turning up really nothing except for the fact that Ben Bennigan is a sexual deviant. And Ben Bennigan's wife is waiting there for him. And so Ben Bennigan, the wife, she's like, let's have sex, Tack. And Tack's like, I don't know. And she's like, yes. And he's like, okay. So they have sex, and then Ben Bennigan gets pissed because the wife is not discreet about these types of things at all. And so Ben Bennigan's like, why don't you come to a party, Tack? A party with all my friends. And Tack's like, I don't really want a party. And Ben Bennigan's like, no! It'll be a great opportunity for you to mingle with my potential murderers. Don't you think? And Tack's like, oh, okay. So then he goes and he gets Jerry, and he's like, hey, Jerry, I'm going to a party with a man that you hate and want to kill. Do you want to come with me? And Jerry's like, yeah, I guess so. And Tack's like, great, then that's what we're gonna do. So they go to the party, and nothing significant happens as far as I recall. I mean, like, nothing significant to the actual plot. They establish that they have these death matches. What they do is they hire this husband and wife team, and they're supposed to battle each other to the death. And then what winds up happening is, because Ben Bennigan is mad about the whole sex with my wife thing, instead he changes the blood match to be kill Tack, and I'll pay you both double your offerings. So the husband and wife kill team try to kill Tack, and then Tack. I think Tack gets rescued by the cop, whose name is Ortega. I remember that one. I remember Ortega. I mean, I also remember some of the other ones, but we're using the stupid names now. So Ortega, she shoots I think she shoots one of the people, or she shoots a screen or something. People get shot, there's some shootings, and everyone's like, wasn't that fun? Wasn't that delightful? And then Ben Bennigan pulls Tack aside, and he's like, if you ever have sex with my wife again, I will send actual people to... to take you out. Don't do that. And Tak's like, okay, all right, I'm sorry. So then we get back to our, investigating everyone and whatever. And so during the investigation, Tak gets captured. He gets captured by this guy named Dimitri the Twin. And the thing with Dimitri the Twin is that Dimitri has made a copy of himself. And so what he does is he's uploaded his brain into more than one body. And so this is like a thing you can do, and they're like, oh, it's highly illegal. And it's actually kind of a really interesting idea. Like the concept of you being able to clone yourself by just like making copies, like copy and paste your brain into other bodies. Like there's only 2 of them, because what they explain is that copying your brain like that is really bad for you. Like apparently it can really mess with your head. So, I don't know, like it's kind of implied he only did it once, but they're like, oh yeah, double sleeving, really bad for you, it really messes up your brain. And I think that was them trying to establish, like, this is why people don't double sleeve, this is why it's illegal. You're not supposed to make copies of yourself because it makes you crazy. But anyway, Dimitri is crazy, and so what happens is they kidnap Tak. Like he goes to like the strip club where Spazzy used to work, and he's like, hey, tell me what happened to Spazzy. And so, they kind of have a back and forth for a while, but then eventually they lure him into a trap where they're like, I'll tell you everything you wanted to know. And so he goes there and he's like, all right, tell me about Spazzy. And they're like, yes, but first here's an injection. And so they stab him in the neck with a knockout drug. Anesthesia. It follows that same comical anesthesia policy that works in all of Hollywood, where you don't really have to measure the person's body weight or anything like that. You just inject them with the full syringe of whatever drug you find laying around, and that's totally safe, and the person doesn't die from that. So so they just inject him with like a syringe full of yellow liquid that knocks him out for exactly as long as they need it, to get him to the interrogation room. And now remember, I mentioned before that the girl had been tortured until she went crazy. Apparently this exact facility is where they tortured this girl until she went crazy. So they put Tak in this computer torture simulator, and they start torturing him. And they don't know who he is. What it turns out they think he is they think that he's a cop named Riker, because he's in the body of a cop. When he got put in his new body, they just put him in a cop. And this cop apparently had a bunch of cybernetic enhancements and things like that, so he was like a better fighter, and he was tougher and meaner and all this stuff. That was the explanation they gave for putting him in the body. But it turned out that the real reason why they put him in this cop named Riker is because the cop, Ortega, was having sex with Riker, and they figured that it would make Ortega really mad. So they were actually just being really petty. So that's also why it turns out that Ortega has been following Tak around for the entire show, is not because she's really interested in Tak, but mostly because her lover's body is being used as a vessel for Tak, and that kind of makes her mad. So, this, you kind of find this out where, like, this guy, he's torturing him, and he's like, admit that you're Riker. And he's like, I'm not Riker. And he's like, no, admit that you're Riker. And he's like, I'm not Riker. And he's like, no, do it. Admit that you're Riker. And so he tortures him. And then he just like starts to go along with it. Like he has all these flashbacks to his training as an emissary. And they're like, yeah, make them think that they're in control. Tell them what they want to hear, but don't tell them what they need to know. And so on and so forth. And he thinks back to all his training and all this stuff. And so he kind of plays the guy. And for a while, like, it's, like, making sense, and I'm like, oh, man, like, how's he gonna get out of this? Like, this actually seems like a legitimately terrible situation that you could not escape from, and that you would need a lot of help to get out of. And so, like, he's going through, and he's like, okay, I'm Riker. And so he's telling him what he wants to hear, but not what he needs to know. Like, he doesn't explain, like, oh, I'm an emissary working for so-and-so, da-da-da-da-da. He doesn't, like, actually tell him anything true. He just starts telling him lies, but lies that he wants to hear. And this makes sense from the perspective of, like, oh, how do you survive? You get through your interrogation or whatever, and then they'll kill you. It makes sense, like, based on his training. But then they started to get in the emissary training where, the story starts to get a little bit stupid. The more they reveal what the emissaries did, the dumber it becomes. And so they go to the flashbacks and they're like, in your emissary training, like, you're in this room, like, you have to get to the next screen, because the next screen is real life. You have to wake up. And so they're like, they don't explain how that exactly works, but they're just like, take something that you really care about and just focus on it really hard. And so Tak he approaches Debbie, or whatever I said her name was, the leader of the emissaries, and he's like, I love you. You're that thing I'm gonna focus on really hard. And so, like, just by focusing on this girl he likes, he wakes up from the torture room. And this is funny because it's, like, unheard of. Like, nobody can do this. Nobody but the emissaries are able to do this. But you're shown the complete training for how he learned to do this. And it really was as simple as just having somebody tell him, like, yeah, just focus on, something you really like. Like, if you really like cake, or, like, if you have, like, a pet that you're really fond of, like, if you have, like, a dog, think about your dog. And, like, that's it. Like, that's how you break out of the system. And bear in mind, this training was from 200 years ago. And what I thought, like, they kept talking ominously about the emissaries and this and that, like, oh, these are the emissaries, this is the emissary. I thought that what they were was, like, they also kept talking about this ancient alien civilization. So I thought that what the premise was that the emissaries were, like, a sci-fi version of the Hittites. And if you're not familiar with the Hittites, they were like one of the first people to regionally discover ironworking. And for some 200 years or so, no one else could really figure out ironworking. So the Hittites just dominated in warfare because they had the best possible equipment. They were very powerful, very influential due to their technological advantage. And so what I thought the emissaries were like a planet of people who had discovered an ancient technology or who had made some kind of major scientific breakthrough, and they were using that to gain an edge in the war. And it was so far ahead that for 200 years, they still hadn't been caught up to, because they tapped into this ancient technology or something like that. That's the logic that I thought was going to work. What is revealed is that they were actually just really into, like, Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson, like they were really in touch with their natural roots. They were like cavemen, they actually they lived in a cave. That was what they did. They lived in a cave, in a forest, and they talked about their feelings, and their leader occasionally gave them little truisms and, like, stupid little hints and ideas for how to be better. Like, it was like, remember, if it rains, always wear your galoshes. And this was, like, the kind of advice that she would give, and it made the emissaries the most powerful fighting force in the known universe. And a lot of them, like, they weren't even, like, disciplined. I'll get into this even further, because this isn't even the episode where they reveal how crappy and not disciplined the emissaries were. But let me just tell you now, emissaries were garbage. Emissaries didn't do anything. The entire thing, it's all just total fiat. The writers just tell you emissaries are good, and you just have to accept that they're good, because let's be honest, Tak is abnormally good on screen. Everything he does, he has way more intuition than everybody else. He's way smarter, he's way faster. Everyone treats him like he's dangerous, but all the training that you're shown and everything that you're shown about the emissaries establishes that emissaries are crap. So, yeah, this was really funny. So they established, like, yeah, just focus on, like, I don't know, like, if you really like pie, focus on pie. And so Tak, he starts to focus on Debbie, and he's just like, I really love Debbie. I really like her. And so then he just, like, wakes up from the torture session. And everyone's like, you can't just do that. And he's like, I can and I did. And also, I'm a secret agent. And if you don't let me up, then I'm gonna do secret agent things and you're all gonna be sorry. And so they untie him, and then he just, like, grabs a gun and kills everyone in the room and blows up a building, and blows up the building. So, that was kind of like, I was like, that wasn't how I expected the emissary training to look. I mean, that was what I took away from it. I was like, alright, seems a little like the writers wrote themselves into a corner and didn't know how to get out. So, that was disappointing. Wow, alright. And, yeah, I was really expecting almost anything else. So yes, so he gets out of there, and then, I can't remember exactly where he gets into next. I think he, I don't know. He gets kidnapped by Dimitri the Twin again. He farts around for a while, and he looks into some things, and he finds out that Ben Bennigan's son was impersonating Ben Bennigan. Like, Ben Bennigan had a clone of his dad that the son was uploading his brain into, and so Ben Bennigan's son was got in trouble at one point in that 48 hours because the dad found out within that 48 hours. So he like went to that he went to go find his son, and he beat his son up. And so they were able to get security footage of like Ben Bennigan beating his son to a pulp. And so they come to him and they're like, yeah, like your son was impersonating you and this and that, and they crack down on everything, and they round up all the clones. And so the dad destroys all the clones, and they're like, so my son killed me? And then the emissary, just completely on gut instinct, he's like, nah, your son's not a killer. And like he's like, I don't think your son has it in him. And so like Ben Bennigan's like, oh, well, okay, so let me know when you do think you have the killer. And so Tack's like, all right, we'll do. And I think that after that is when he gets kidnapped or something happens. I don't know, there's some stuff that happens, and it's not like terrible stuff, but I don't think it's terribly relevant. But he gets kidnapped by Dimitri the Twin, who comes back. Oh, that's right, yeah, he spares Dimitri the Twin, he gets his disc, and then he winds up giving it to Ortega. And then Ortega's like, yeah, give him a body, and then tell him that he sucks, and it'll make him feel really bad, and then he'll tell us everything we want to know. So they give him a new body, and then sure enough, he escapes. Like, they're just like, all right, this is not going to be a problem. And it's all off the record. She's like, yeah, we're going to torture him off the record, so don't take any procedures, don't take any precautions. Just, let's just torture him. So they give him a body, it's all off the record, and then he just, like, escapes. And so they're like, oh, that was dumb. But of course the police chief becomes aware, and he's like, that was really stupid. Like a cop gets killed and all kinds of things, and the police chief was just like, this is why we don't do things off the books. I'm a little miffed. I'm gonna be honest, not gonna fire you. But definitely, keeping an eye on you. If you do anything wrong more than breaking the law and doing all the drugs and mass murder and everything that's gone wrong so far, if you do anything worse than that, we're gonna have a talk. And so he just kind of lets it go, and so then Dimitri kidnaps Tack, and they take them to like a fight dome. And the fight dome was I kind of like the guy who runs the fight dome. He's like a little bit of a cartoon character. But anyway, though, they're in the fight dome, and then they battle for a while, and then they start to lose, and then a woman comes in with a katana, and with her amazing katana skills, murders everybody who has all their guns. And apparently this is right about where they go completely off the rails from the book, because it turns out the lady with the katana is actually Tack's sister. And this is important because Tack's sister died as far as Tack was aware. So Tack is like, he gets kidnapped by his sister, and then his sister is like, oh, I missed you so much. And he starts having all these flashbacks to what it meant to be an emissary. And what it turns out it meant to be an emissary was that actually most of his military training seems to have come from the fact that he was part of the military. Originally, he was part of the Galactic Republic, or whatever they're called, and he joined up with their special forces. And so he was like a Galactic Republic Navy SEAL, or Green Beret, or a Gurkha, or whatever it was. Whatever horrific, terrible, dangerous thing, he was that. And at one point, he found out that his sister had been sold off to the Yakuza by the Galactic Republic, more or less. Like, she was put into a program, but then the program was corrupt, and they just sold her off to the Yakuza. So, pissed about that, he abandons the Galactic Republic to join up with his sister, and they both go off to hide in the woods. And this was a huge letdown, because previously in my head, they still hadn't established this yet, so I was still envisioning that the emissaries were like an entire planet, like an entire race of people, who had discovered advanced technology, because they kept bringing up the ancients and like all these things that hinted at advanced technology. And so it turns out that what it actually was is that the emissaries was a group of 40, 50 people, something like that lived in a cave on a remote planet with really nothing in it. And I guess that they just ate rabbits and turnips and whatever. And this intense diet and intense mental training was what made them so scary. So he met this lady, Phoebe, and Phoebe, the leader of the emissaries, is something of she's just a fictional person. Like, everything that she says sounds very scripted, like it's all sort of poetic, sort of that kind of like sophismatic, or sophisms is I guess what you call them, just those like little platitudes, She gives this like advice, and the advice is really like, It seems like anyone could come up with it. It's like, remember, if you're being shot at, try not to get tunnel vision. And then they're all like, oh, wow, I never thought of that. This is amazing training. Wow. Like when I was in the Navy SEALs, they didn't teach me anything about tunnel vision. Whoa, no wonder we're so far ahead. And one of the things that they can do is they can like teleport into bodies that they don't own, so long as nobody else is in them. They just kind of like, with the proper equipment, can be directly beamed into like an inactive body. And so normally, like when you do that, you get what they call sleeve sickness, where you have to kind of adjust to being in this new body. You have to get used to the body. And so what Debbie does is she's just like, yeah, when you get beamed into the body, like most people try to fight the body. But if you want to use the body really fast, then just relax and go along with what the body wants. And they're like, oh, wow, that's really good advice. And she's like, yeah, and also, if it gets cold, put on a hat and wear a jacket. And they're like, oh, man, we had so many people who froze to death in the Gurkhas. For so many people, the Green Berets don't know anything about cold weather. Wow! Wow! This is amazing! And so, like the Green Berets, they had nothing on this, like, emissary. They sat around in the woods and they read poetry and they talked about getting in touch with their feelings. And they weren't even organized. Like, Tak shows up and they're like, yeah, he's an emissary now. And, like, the other emissaries are like, oh, Tak, you're dumb. And, like, they get in these, like, petty little arguments and these fights. And Debbie is like, listen, your power is not in your weapons, it's in your friends. You have to kind of cooperate and stuff like that. And then they're like, oh, wow, yeah, no, in the Navy SEALs, we didn't learn anything about cooperation. Oh, wow, emissaries are amazing. and yeah, all of their training seemed like really disorganized and really inefficient, and they just come across as this completely stupid. I mean, like, I've seen video training of like the Taliban or whatever, where they get like children's jungle gym equipment and they like put it out there and they're like, oh, it's an obstacle course, go run through. And they're just trying to like instill confidence in their guys by making them feel like they're getting training. Like, I feel like the Taliban get better, like those guys out there on the kids' jungle gym equipment were getting better training than what the emissaries were going through. Because the emissaries didn't even have like an obstacle course or anything like that. I mean, they had like a VR room where they're doing things, and I don't know, you're just not showing any kind of like real training, and so they just come across as this really disorganized, like there's not really a lot of discipline, everybody disagrees about what they want to do. When they have missions, they just take volunteers, they're like, here's the mission, hands up who wants to go. Like, they don't assign you. So if you don't show up for the meeting, for the mission brief, there's a chance you might not be elected to go, even if you were the best soldier for the job. Like, maybe you were a demolitions expert, but you just overslept. Well, you weren't there to raise your hand to volunteer for the mission, therefore you just were, you could leave anytime you want. It's an as-you-like basis. Like I say, no discipline, no nothing, no structure. It's just weird. And Tak's sister is there with him the entire time, but she kind of doesn't go in for it. And apparently, the worst part is that Debbie doesn't even explain, like, everyone's kind of in it because they dislike the Galactic Republic, they're just fighting the Galactic Republic. But then later on, Debbie explains, like, yeah, our real goal is to stop stacks from allowing people to live for more than 100 years. We want to change the stacks so that in 100 years, everybody dies. And so everyone's like, oh, we didn't know that. You actually hadn't explained it before. And she's like, yeah, so if you're still in it, I need a show of hands for who wants to join me on tomorrow's mission. And so, like, Tak raises his hand, and a couple of other people raise their hands. And she's like, okay, all right, the team's kind of small, but I think we can work with it. Remember, like Henry David Thoreau did say. And so, it's kind of like this just, I don't know, so disappointing. Like, they were built up, and they just were made to, like, I mean, like, seriously, 200 years later, and people were still impressed about the emissaries. It's like, how were they so impressive if this was what they did? Like, how were these the people that left an impression on the world? I mean, they, like, what did they do? It must have been something they did, because it wasn't them that was all that amazing, as far as I can tell. I mean, like, Tak, like I said, he got all this, like, Navy SEAL training, so the impression was, like, Tak was the best of them because he was one of the only guys who had any military training. I don't know. So anyway, though, The sister decides that she actually wanted to live for longer than 100 years, so she betrays the emissaries by just telling the government where they were hiding. And that, as it turns out, is all the government really needed to wipe them out, because the emissaries don't have any resources. All they have is a tree that they live underneath. A cave. They have a cave. That's it. So they get hit with a virus that makes them all go insane. But fortunately, Tak is too far away from the radius of the attack, and he's not killed. Deborah and his sister are also outside the radius of the attack. And so Deborah takes off in a space transport. You know, she's one of the only survivors with Tak, or with Tak's sister, excuse me. And so then Tak's sister, she signals to the ground forces like, hey guys, here we are. And I don't know why they needed the signal, because, I mean, like, they were a great big shuttle. It didn't look like it was, like, stealthy or anything like that, but who knows? It's the future. Maybe you don't have to look stealthy to be stealthy. But anyway, though, she signals to them where they are, and so they just blow her up with a laser. And so Tak's like, oh no, I'm the only emissary. All my other 50 or 40 friends or whatever are dead, and our brilliant leader is dead. Oh no! So they arrest Tak, and they put him on ice. And so then Tak, he like asks his sister, he's like, how did you live? And she's like, oh, you know. And he's like, huh. And so then he goes, and she's like, I'm gonna go in this other room. And he's like, okay. And then he just like gets up and he like turns around the hall and he like walks down a little ways and he finds all these like bodies. And they're bodies of characters that have appeared throughout the series. And then he's like, wait a minute, you were this little girl, and you were this guy, and you were this person? And then she's like, yeah. And then he's like, where did you get all this money? And she's like, nowhere. And he's like, you were paid to betray us, weren't you? And she's like, oh, god darn it, I could never lie to you. You're always smarter than me. And he's like, oh, why? And she's like, well, I wanted to live for a long time. And so he's just like, well, I don't want to be friends then. I don't want to be your brother anymore. And she's like, no, don't say that. Look, you need to go and tell Ben Bennigan that I didn't kill him. And he's like, what? And he's like, yeah, because I did kill him, but you need to make him think that someone else killed him. So Tak sets up this entire charade where he like frames someone else. And then so Ben Bennigan like fires his lawyer because he framed the lawyer, I think is what it was, is what she was. And so he does that, and then afterward Tak tries to figure out how to get back at his sister, and this is where it just starts to get really dumb. It gets into all this weird stuff where like Ortega starts looking into the sister, and then the sister like she comes into like a room full of the clones of the sister, and the sister starts like, she like occupies the bodies of the clones, and like she just keeps like running towards her stark naked, unarmed, and Ortega keeps shooting the clones. And it's like, you know, you could transport in anywhere you wanted. Why do you keep transporting into the clones that she's just gonna shoot? I don't understand. I don't know. I don't get what's going on. And so she kidnaps Ortega, and then she like uses Ortega's body, and she goes to be with Tak, and she's like, touch my boobs, Tak. And Tak's like, wait a minute, you're my sister, aren't you? And she's like, darn it, I could never lie to you. Man, Tak, this is so frustrating. Why won't you touch my boobs? And then Tak's like, this is weird. Go home, sister. Go home. Oh my god. And so they start looking into like where the sister is making all of her money. And it turns out that where she's making all of her money is she runs this like satellite in low orbit where you can go and like murder girls for a sexual thrill. And apparently this is like a really huge market. Like there's billionaires from all over the world who come in to like murder girls. And what they do is they change your stack so that you're religious and you can't be spun up after you're murdered. And I don't really understand this because like if they wanted to like really, really murder people, why didn't they just, I don't know, like murder them? And then like the stacks are just little discs. So all you need to do is just, I don't know, like throw the stack somewhere, like smash it up, turn it into scrap, I don't know, format the hard drive. I'm not sure what exactly the issue is, why they had to have this like religious coding. But like I say, it was a major part of the plot. They hinted at it throughout the entire show. It was a really big deal. Everyone kept talking about like what it meant to have this religious coding that prevented you from being spun up again, and And so anyway though, like they had this whole elaborate thing going on where like there was all this, it became a liability. because they could find, like, here's this pattern of people who have had religious coding installed on them when they weren't religious. And so it was like part of how they were tracked. It was a huge liability. And so anyway, though, so they go to the satellite. And by this point, like I mentioned earlier, that like Poe the AI was originally stated like no one uses their services anymore. They're weird. Nobody likes them. Well, throughout this entire thing, Poe had been insanely useful. Not only was he like a hotel with guns, but he was also able to like train himself in any skill like instantly. So whenever Tech needed something, he would just be like, Poe, teach me about hydroponic farming. And Poe would just be like, okay. And like Poe would just know everything about hydroponic farming. Like whenever he was like, Poe, I need you to hack into a government database, Poe would be like, okay. And he would just go hack into a government database. Like he could do anything. And at one point, Spazzy, the girl who was insane, they were like, hey Spazzy, can you fix the girl? And Poe was like, okay. And so he just like learned psychology and he trained the girl to be better. Like he just like pulled her out of her like tortured psyche and was like, all right, now you're trained. And not only did he revive her from her insanity, but he also like trained her to be like Spetznaz, Kirka, whatever. And they explained, they're like, how are you getting so good at murder so fast? And she's like, oh, Poe's training program allows for time dilation. So it was a freaking hyperbolic time chamber. Like, Poe was everything. Poe could be a hyperbolic time chamber. He could be like a hydroponic farmer. He could be a hacker. At one point, they give him a virus, and they have him, like, upload this virus into, like, another AI so they can, like, frame this lady. Like, he does everything. He's an incredibly powerful piece of AI that can do anything at all that you want, and he is slavishly devoted to whoever paid for his services. And at the end of this show, I was like, why did people stop staying at these hotels? Like, what possessed them to say, like, yeah, you know, I mean, like, the AI really just takes a lot of challenge out of life. You know, he does my taxes, he runs a business for me, you know, he manages all my assets, he does everything that I could ever want. He creates a hyperbolic time chamber that allows me to train skills at faster than like a human lifespan. You know, 1 year in the hyperbolic time chamber is 1,000 years in real life, and I've gained 1,000 years of experience through training with Poe. You know, it really just kind of sucks. You know, I would rather stay in a more conventional hotel. Like, I don't know. I just did not understand that at all. Like I say, it started off that it seemed like the writers were going in one direction, like, oh yeah, the hotels suck. And then they went in a completely different direction where they were just like, oh, the AI can do anything. And he will, because he loves you. And I mean, like, man, they tested him time and again, where they were like, you know, Poe, we've got this, like, incentive for you to betray these guys. And Poe just stayed slavishly loyal to them the entire time. Like, they were rude to Poe. They really didn't take him seriously. They were just like, yeah, Poe's just an AI. They were never really terribly appreciative of Poe. And eventually, they even kill Poe. Like they come in and they're just like, Poe, eat death. And Poe, like, just stands there and takes it. He gets deleted from existence. And it's like this big dramatic moment, and it's kind of just like, man, like, why would these not be liked? I mean, like, maybe they were like Google, like maybe when it's just one person, he has an easy time doing it. But when it's like you know, millions of people all staying at these hotels, it's like Google. He just like finds the worst common denominator and applies it to everybody, and you know. So everyone's like, yeah, those hotels suck. But then once everybody stopped using them, the AI got itself straightened out, and it was like, hang on, I think I've got it figured out what my one user wants, you know. If there were a million of us, I'd be showing you Logan Paul, but with only one of you, no problem. So, yes. Yeah, so anyway, though, so they train up Spazzy to be better than the Spetznaz. She's like this supercharged, she achieves Super Saiyan level 3 while she's in the thing. And she even appears to gain the ability to tell the future. Like, this is how good Poe is that his whole system of rehabilitation not only, like, makes the girl feel more comfortable about the sexual abuse and the torture, but also teaches her to tell the future. So she's like talking to people, and they're like, hey Spazzy, how you doing? And she's like, I can see the future. And they're like, wow, what do you see? And she's like, I'm going to kill everyone. And they're like, oh, wow, okay. And so yeah, so what they decide to do is that they're gonna go and they're gonna destroy the satellite that Tak's sister had built to murder people for sexual reasons, and like I say, this weird like sexual deviant thing, it's just like it's really high profile. I mean, like, you can see it from Earth. Like, you can just look up there and it's just like satellite of love, and it's got like advertising and it's not like hidden or anything like that. And for whatever reason though, like, it's so popular that it becomes this like multi-million-dollar business that permits the building of like this low orbit satellite and all this stuff. And it's like this thing that the sister has been cultivating for a long time. And like I say, this was the thing where it got into the fact that like Spazzy's recovery and this weird like sex murder thing. This is one of these things where I say like they have this kind of like weird sex related thing that just struck me as really odd and out of place and not workable. Like you know, like, I can understand like, okay, so like Spazzy is like a sexual assault victim and she needs therapy to help her get over it and to help her become confident again. Like, that I followed. But then they just took it to a weird place where they were like, yeah, so she needs therapy and counseling and weapons training and time dilation. She needs a hyperbolic time. You know, she needs to become Super Saiyan 3. And, you know, we're going to teach her how to needle cast into a body so that she's basically like an emissary, only better. You know, like, she's got to learn how to tell the future. And it's sort of like, whoa, whoa, whoa. All right, like, I understand the message of like, all right, yeah, so this seedy like sexual deviance, like, this is really bad and it ruins a person's life, but we've gone on a weird trajectory, Altered Carbon. Like, we went from the plausible realm of like, all right, I follow you, this fits in with the theme of the show, to being like, okay, we're starting to get into like Dragon Ball Z type stuff. Like, what are we doing here? And then with the sister too, it was kind of like, all right, yeah, so sexual deviancy, like, you kill the girls and then you buy them new bodies. And so I could see how, like, when they were just these little seedy little bars on Earth, you know, I could see how that was plausible. But then it was like, all right, so you can already kill people and then replace their bodies. So that's like a niche, you know, that's a niche. Not a lot of people do that, presumably. I mean, like, that can't be a huge market. Like, how many people realistically would want to do that to people? I mean, like, part of the idea is that the guys who live for a long time, they just develop boredom. And that's why they eventually resort to like murder sex, because they're just so bored that they'd rather be doing anything new. But the people who live forever are a very, very small elite core. There's only like a couple hundred of them. So bars that permit this kind of behavior, like, it made sense when they were small and they were seedy, and it was kind of like a secret, you know, that you weren't really supposed to know you could murder the girls. It wasn't like widely advertised, and it was kind of a scandal if one of the girls got messed up because of it, you know, like, that all kind of made sense. But then they were like, yeah, you know, giant satellite, multi-million-dollar enterprise, you pay billions of dollars to get in here. Like, they had like a system where you had to go through like various trials. Like, first you did normal murder sex, and then you did like simulated permanent murder sex, and then you did like actual murder sex. And you know, it's sort of like, how many multi-billion-dollar, like, how many multi-billionaires or whatever are really there in that market? Like, are they really all in that market? Is it like every single one of them, did they all turn to this? Because when Ben Bennigan gets caught doing it at the end of the series, it's a big deal. I mean, like, they arrest him, and like, you know, the rest of his family wasn't aware this was going on, you know. But like I say, apparently this was a booming business that the sister was running on, this like weird sex murder ring that she was doing. Like, it wasn't just a seedy underbelly thing now. It was like this glorified, like, oh, pinnacle of society is doing this, you know, da, da, da. So Tak goes up there, and what they do is they put a virus in his sister's downloads, so that way her brain uploads, so that way she can't cast into more bodies. They're like, yeah, we've ruined all your bodies. We've ruined all your brains. And so this is your one life. This person that you are now, this is all you got left. So I can't remember what their plot was. I think they were trying to get her to confess to evil. And then after she confessed, they were going to put her on ice. And, you know, some infinity time later, they might release her and she'd be back to being a normal person. And I think that was what Tak explicitly said he wanted. But, I don't know. So the sister was like, are you crazy? Like, I run a murder satellite. Like, I run... like, every single one of my, like, these women die for real forever. Like, that's super illegal. Like, they're not just gonna give me a couple of life sentences. It's pretty much like I'll never wake up. And then she was like not even registered because she was an emissary, like she was officially not a person. So there was just like so many flaws in this plan. But anyway, though, like Tak and the team get captured. Like their plan fails, and big surprise, the plan fails. Oh, and there's this scene that I thought was really funny where they have Jerry go up there, and Jerry's like, "I am a rich murder lover man," and they're like, "Yeah," and they take him to this room, and there's like a girl, and so he's like, and she's like, "Do you want to stab me to death and then have sex with the holes in my body?" And he's just like, "Oh God, no! Like that sounds awful. Why would I want to do that?" And she's like, I mean, it's what everyone pays to do." And so he's like, well, first let's have a drink. And so he like drugs the girl's drink and he hands her the drink. And bear in mind, she's coded artificially to show that, she can't be woken up. Like she doesn't know she has this code in her, but she dies. She really dies. So he just like gives her this anesthesia, like in her drink. And so she drinks it and then she passes out. And this is important because like after the series, I was like laying in bed and then I just rolled over to Claudia and I was like, that girl died. Because I'll get to this, but that girl dies. Bear this in mind. Anyway, though, so like they make this big deal of like, oh, we have to shut this place down. I don't want to murder any more of these people. So like Jerry's actually kind of a nice guy. He's like not really like a sociopathic killer like a lot of the other characters in this show. So what winds up happening though is Spazzy telecasts into like one of the sex androids. And for whatever reason, the sex android is like also designed to kill. It's like a kill bot, kill android, military grade or something like that. That's the impression that's given. So she puts on this ridiculous leather getup and she tries to act all like badass, but she's really short and she's got like this really big afro and she's just not an intimidating looking person. She's strutting around in like heels and it's just sort of like, man, this was somewhat ill-advised. Like, everything having to do with Spazzy was just somewhat ill-advised. I don't... like, I was with you when her dad was heartbroken about her being, mind-shattered. But at this point, I just... like, I don't get where we're going with this. Like, what exactly are we doing? And so she like, runs around. She, like, shoots all the people on the satellite, kills everybody. And then she goes to the power generators, and she blows up all the power generators. So the satellite starts to fall out of orbit. And there's like a big alarm and they're like, everyone evacuate. And so Spazzy is like helping the girls escape from the sex dungeon. And the girls are like, oh God, where do we go? And they're like, the escape pods are over there. And again, bear in mind, that girl that got drugged, so she passed out. Nobody knew that she was even still alive. I mean, like she was supposed to be sex murdered by this guy. So like, I can't conceive of anyone going to check on her, like probably nobody went into that room to rescue that girl. And so like I rolled over and I was like that girl died. Like there's no way, like she was drugged, she was passed out in that bedroom. Like when the building fell, that was within within 20 minutes of the drugging. Like she had not recovered from the drugging by then. Like she died in that satellite crash. She was gone, dead, destroyed. So like Claudia laughed at that. She's like, oh my God, do you think that Jerry realized that same thing? Like, do you think that he just rolled over next to his wife with the same way that you did and was like, oh my God, I forgot about the girl. Oh God. But he probably did. Like, that's probably one of those things like that he just like realized well after it was too late. Because I mean, there was chaos, the building was crashing down. His daughter was a killer android. There's a lot going on. So yeah, Jerry's just like, holy crap, oh God, or he would be anyway, if he knew. They didn't bring it up. They sort of omit the fact that they drugged a girl and then crashed the satellite that she was sleeping in. So, so Tak, he battles with his sister and, fight to the death, and then the satellite crashes, and, I don't know, the sister at one point reveals that Debbie's stack is still saved somewhere, so Tak has something to do after the series is over. But, it really doesn't matter, because by that point, I'm really kind of like, I feel like Debbie was really lame. And the whole thing with the emissaries really just diminished everything. All the plot with the sister and her weird sex empire was like super, super weird, super dumb. Didn't make a lot of sense. The stuff with Spazzy becoming a killer, like a future-seeing killer android. Like I don't know. That was really weird. That was really dumb. Like, again, I just don't understand, like, if an AI could do that for you, like, why was an AI not managing the entire military? Why was it that the special ops teams weren't trained by Poe, the hotel? You know, I don't know. It started off really strong. Oh, and Tech doesn't die. And it's weird because, like, he double sleeves. At one point, he copies his brain and then puts his brain into another body before he does this plan. Because I think he knew that he was gonna get captured, and also he uses his other body to create a diversion. But anyway, though, it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know. It all ends, and then he goes off to go find Debbie, and like he has to choose which sleeve dies, and they do rock paper scissors to figure it out. And yeah, Jerry and his wife and Spazzy all go back to their normal lives, and Ben Bennigan gets arrested for being a murder sex guy. Oh, and it turns out the reason why Ben Bennigan shot himself was because he did the murder sex and then felt really bad about it, and he didn't want to remember that he did it, so he shot himself before the timer could run down, before the upload would run down. And that way he wouldn't have to remember that he did it, and that was kind of that was that hook. And yeah, so started off really strong, was looking really good, would have very, very strongly recommended it if it had stayed on the path that it was on, but it kind of falls apart at the end. Like I say, it gets into this weird, like, sex stuff. Like I say, Ava, the wife of Jerry, actually gets brought back as a hacker, but she's like put into a man's body, and so they have this kind of like romance going on between the two men, and that was kind of funny. But like I say, I'm starting to just notice this pattern with Netflix where they just kind of have like this weird, like, okay, so these people are gay, and like that. I don't know. It's not like the men being in love thing wasn't really like so bad, but the whole, like, the thing with Spazzy and the sex empire was really stupid. I just couldn't figure out the logic in it. Like, I couldn't figure out how your universe could work to where you could build that up. I mean, like, unless there are just so many billionaires that they become this huge market. But then, I don't know, like, if that's illegal, how do you not get shut down? Like, how do you become a huge market? How do you become the huge thing worth billions of dollars, but then not get any notoriety, like, not be investigated? Like, I don't know. I mean, they didn't do anything else on that satellite. Like, that was just what they did. Like, I don't know. So, yeah. Starts off really good, ends up really kind of dumb. It's too bad, but I hear the book is much better. I hear the book was actually really good. And so if you like the premise of Altered Carbon, apparently what people tell me is that you should totally go check out the book, because the book is way better, and the book kind of sticks to its guns on the stuff that's actually cool and on the stuff that actually makes sense. Netflix apparently made some changes and decided some things needed to happen that really kind of diminished the story. So, yes, I suppose that's it. Thanks for joining me, everybody. I'll catch you all next time.